My name is Daisy Quinn, 32 years old. The phone buzzed against the scratched laminate of my kitchen counter, jittering toward the sink like it wanted to escape. Unknown sender. Subject line: They're using you. The bright white screen pressed into the dim December morning felt like a dentist's light over a tender tooth. Spam, I thought, thumb hovering over delete, but instinct tugged. 32 years of waiting for the other shoe to drop has a way of sharpening your ear for footsteps. I opened it. No message. Just a single video attachment with a nondescript file name, the kind that makes your stomach go cold before you even press play. I tapped. My parents' living room bloomed onto the screen, lopsided, as if whoever held the camera had tilted their wrist to keep it discreet. Familiar furniture arranged like a stage set I knew by heart. The leather recliner I bought for Gideon last Father's Day. The soft gray sofa Meryl let me choose because she liked how practical it sounded. A stem of red wine dangled from my mother's manicured hand as she perched on the sofa arm. My father lounged with his belt unbuckled like a king after a feast. Corbin sprawled across the cushions, one ankle hooked over the other, the picture of someone to whom life had always arrived prepackaged and prepaid. They were laughing. Not the genteel chuckles they offer when I foot the bill or bring dessert, but open-mouthed, careless laughter that makes you feel like a joke, even if you didn't hear the setup. She's so practical? My mother rolled the word in her mouth like it tasted wrong. She's really planning to make us eat her dry turkey on Christmas Eve? Corbin cackled, nearly sloshing his wine. Zero taste, he said, waving at the room. Remember that awful painting in the entry? God. I felt the remembered weight of that painting's price tag. The $300 I'd saved by wearing the same winter coat one more year press into my ribs. Gideon raised his glass and dropped his voice. A toast to her bonus. Aspen's gonna be sweet. The words snagged in my chest. Aspen? Corbin lifted his glass and smirked, eyes flashing toward the camera like he was performing for a friend. Just as long as the workhorse keeps pulling. Heat tore up my neck. Workhorse. The floor seemed to tilt, the video blurring for a heartbeat, and suddenly I was not in my kitchen anymore. I was 25, hunched over my old laptop, the Italy itinerary glowing warm and golden on the screen like a window into another life. 14 days through Tuscany and along the Amalfi Coast. I'd scraped for that dream with packed lunches and extra shifts and the kind of relentless optimism exhausted people call foolish. My phone lit up. Mom. Rosie? The way she says my name when she needs something. Corbin wrecked another car. Insurance won't cover it. We don't know what to do. I stared at the confirmation button for my flight to Rome until the numbers doubled. How much? I asked. 5,000. My entire Italy fund moved out of my account with a single pulse of blue. You're the only one we can count on, she'd said. What would we do without you? The video's sound snapped me back. The clink of glass on glass, just in time to watch them discuss Christmas lists, a designer purse, a watch, a sound system. My face didn't sting this time. It cooled and sharpened, pain solidifying into something with edges. I placed the phone flat on the counter, palm pressing until the buzz in my veins leveled out. This, I whispered to my quiet apartment, to the thrifted table and the humming refrigerator and the calendar with other people's needs circled in red ink, is the end. I picked up the phone again, replayed the video, and watched with a different kind of attention. Not for the insults, but the details. A hand dipped briefly into frame as a glass was set down. Thin fingers, neat cuticles, a simple band that caught the light and flashed like a signal. Whoever recorded this wasn't hiding behind a window. They were in the room. Someone had watched it happen and decided I should know. Betrayals can be gifts, I thought, and felt something uncoil. My laptop breathed awake beneath my fingers. The bonus notification blinked in the corner of my bank account. 6 figures, already spent in their minds. For the first time in my adult life, I looked at that number and thought one clean, selfish word: mine. Not their mortgage, not the truck payment, not Corbin's art supplies, mine. I opened my calendar and dialed. Diane answered on the second ring. She always does. Daisy, it's late. Everything okay? I need to take my PTO, I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. All 3 weeks, starting tomorrow. A beat. The Kessler account? Close this afternoon, I said. Paperwork's done. Another beat. You've earned it, she said. I'll process it first thing. Gratitude swelled and passed. I was already on the airline site, booking a first-class ticket to Jackson Hole. The Amangani confirmed my reservation in the time it took me to draw a breath and let it out. Next came the surgical work. I logged into my bank and navigated to automatic payments, a graveyard of obligations. I'd set up to make their lives smoother at the cost of sanding my own to a nub. Cancel. Parents' mortgage, $2,500. Cancel. Gideon's truck payment, $700. Cancel. Merrill's club dues, $500. Cancel. Corbin's monthly stipend, $1,000. A red banner flickered at the top. Temporary security hold. Please confirm identity. My pulse jumped. For a second, I imagined a hand reaching through the ether and closing around my wrist. I verified codes, answered questions only a person who reads her own statements would know, and the hold fell away with a small chime. The confirmations lined up like dominoes tipping in my favor. I changed every password: bank, email, cloud storage, Amazon, then turned on two-factor authentication for each account. My phone chirped with code after code, a staccato rhythm that felt like a perimeter forming in real time. I wrote to building management. Due to security concerns, please rekey 12B immediately. I'll cover costs. The reply pinged back. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. I stared at the chain of messages on the screen, at the neat column of successful cancellation emails, and felt the old animal panic flatten into focus. The last task was the most satisfying. I called Elite Catering's after-hours line. Hi, this is Daisy Quinn. I'd like to change the delivery address for my December 24th order. Of course, the woman chirped, keys clicking. Where to? Fire Station number 5 on Madison. Please include a note. Happy holidays to our local heroes. The woman's voice softened. That's very generous. They deserve it, I said, and hung up. The kitchen clock ticked into the small hours. If I'd been a different kind of person, I might have cried. I didn't. Instead, I did the mundane things that make decisions real. Rinsed a cup, wiped a ring of condensation from the counter, folded a dish towel over the oven handle. I stared at the towel for a second longer than usual, thinking of how often I'd used my good things quietly and put them back clean, as if invisibility were part of their function. At 7 a.m., a new key slid across a leasing agent's desk toward me. All done, she said. I pocketed it like a talisman. Back home, I packed deliberately. Sweaters rolled tight, boots wrapped in a grocery bag, a paperback I'd been pretending to read for months. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, skittering in tiny bursts as if it wanted me to chase it. The screen flashed. Gideon. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. Hello? The dealership just called, he barked, thunder already rolling. Truck payment declined. What did you do? Fix it. Now. The old instinct, open the laptop, apologize with my whole body, move heaven and money, rose like a reflex and died all at once. That's weird, Dad, I said, voice flat as a level. Must be a bank error. I'm walking into a meeting. I'll check later. Later? His volume climbed. They're threatening to. Gotta go, I said, and ended the call. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of something new, a presence I realized was my own life, taking up its rightful space. I picked up the suitcase handle. The zipper teeth flashed as I pulled it closed. Small lightning, contained and final. On the counter, my phone lay face down. I resisted the urge to flip it and check for new storms. I didn't need to. The forecast had already changed. I left the apartment without looking back, the new key cooling in my pocket, the old locks meaningless behind me. In the hallway, a neighbor passed with a bag of oranges and gave me a small nod. I nodded back, and for the first time in years, it felt like the simplest gesture in the world to meet a stranger's eyes and not be carrying anything for anyone else. The plane touched down in Wyoming under a sky so clean it looked freshly laundered. The air bit my cheeks as I stepped out of the terminal, a cold that didn't feel punishing but pure, like a reset button. By the time the shuttle wound its way up the snow-fringed hill to the Amangani, I could already feel the static of the city slipping off me. The resort sat like a quiet secret carved into the mountainside. Warm wood, amber light, the kind of silence that listens back. Inside my suite, the fire hissed softly, the Tetons framed by the glass, like a painting too large for any wall. I poured a glass of champagne from the welcome tray and watched the bubbles rise, thinking of the word that had chased me through every year of my adult life: responsible. It had been both praise and leash. I didn't know who I was without it. The first day passed like an exhale. I let myself be still for the first time in years. Spa treatments, long naps, room service breakfasts I didn't have to share. I read novels I'd bought but never opened. I slept without my phone within arm's reach. But freedom, even the good kind, has its ghosts. Every time the wind rattled the windows, I imagined Gideon's voice behind it, Meryl's sigh, Corbin's snide little laugh. I'd mute them with another sip of wine or a hot bath, but they lingered like smoke. By the fourth day, Christmas Eve, the mountains had been dusted in a fresh layer of snow. The resort glowed with understated holiday cheer, pines wrapped in white lights, cinnamon and spruce wafting through the lobby. I spent the afternoon in the heated infinity pool, the surface steaming against the falling flakes. The contrast, the sting of cold air, the warmth beneath the water, felt like my whole life distilled into a single moment. Opposites that somehow coexisted. When I finally returned to my suite, towel wrapped around me like armor, my phone blinked on the bedside table. Dozens of missed calls. Unknown numbers. I turned it over, screen down, my chest tightening. Then, curiosity won. I powered it on. Messages flooded in like an avalanche from Meryl. "Where are you?" From Corbin. "Mom's freaking out." From Gideon. "The door is locked." From Meryl again. "We're standing outside your apartment." Then Gideon. "This isn't funny." I opened the Ring app. The feed loaded slowly, snowflakes drifting past the lens before focusing. And there they were, 3 figures huddled on the landing outside my old apartment, like confused tourists who'd shown up to find the attraction closed for the season. Meryl wore her cashmere coat, the one I'd given her last Christmas. Gideon's breath fogged the air as he stomped impatiently, face flushed with fury. Corbin leaned against the railing, checking his phone like he had anywhere better to be. I unmuted the audio. "She wouldn't dare," Gideon barked. "She's ignoring us," Corbin muttered. "What if something happened to her?" Meryl's voice pitched high, brittle with performative panic. I watched her hand go to her chest, the pearl bracelet I'd bought her flashing in the camera light. Theatrical, all of it. Gideon pounded on the door again. "I've called her 12 times. "Maybe she's working late," Corbin offered, half-hearted. Meryl rounded on him. "It's Christmas Eve," he shrugged. "She's not answering, Mom." For a few seconds, they just stood there, the 3 of them, caught in their own reflection on the security glass. Something unexpected bloomed in my chest. Amusement, pure and clean. I leaned back against the headboard and turned up the volume. Meryl jabbed at the doorbell again and again. The chime echoed faintly through the hallway, unanswered. Gideon's voice dropped low, that dangerous quiet he used when he wanted obedience. "This ends now." I could see the moment it dawned on them. How real this was. The groceries wouldn't appear. The payments wouldn't clear. The world wouldn't spin on the rhythm of my generosity anymore. I lifted my glass of mulled wine, took a slow sip, and whispered to the empty suite, "Merry Christmas." A part of me, a small and terrible part, wanted to end it there, to turn off the feed, let them stew in confusion until it hardened into fear. But I wanted them to know, to understand why. I scrolled to our family group chat, hesitated, then attached the video, the one that started everything. The laughter, the toasts, the word workhorse that had peeled something raw inside me. I added a text. "Heard you wanted Aspen. Hope this helps with your packing list. P.S. All auto payments stopped 2 weeks ago. Good luck." I hit send. On the Ring feed, I watched 3 heads dip simultaneously as their phones buzzed. Meryl opened hers first. I saw her expression change, curiosity, then confusion, then horror. Gideon leaned over her shoulder. The blood drained from his face. Corbin stared, jaw tightening, color rising high on his neck. Who sent her this? Gideon demanded. She can't just... Meryl started, voice faltering. She's gone, Corbin said softly, his eyes still on the screen. She's gone. The words hung in the frosty air like a verdict. For the first time in my life, I watched them without feeling smaller. They looked so small themselves. People who'd spent their lives taking, now bewildered that the faucet had run dry. I recorded a short clip from the feed, not out of spite, but as a reminder of what freedom looked like when you finally chose it. When Meryl started fake crying into her phone, calling hospitals, I guessed, I turned off the sound. Their mouths moved, their bodies jerked with anger, but it was all silent now, like an old film playing for an audience that had already left the theater. The snow outside my window thickened, swirling in slow, hypnotic loops. I watched them a little longer. Gideon slamming his fist against the door, Corbin slumping to the ground, Meryl collapsing into a melodramatic crouch, then powered off the phone. Silence reclaimed the room. I stood by the window, the mountains inked dark against the bruised sky, the reflection of my own face faint in the glass. There was no satisfaction, not really, just the faint tremor of release, like air escaping a sealed jar. In the corner of the suite, my suitcase sat open on the bench, half unpacked. I knelt to fold a sweater, the same gray one I'd worn for 3 winters because it still works fine. I placed it back into the case just to see what it felt like to pack again, not out of obligation, but choice. When I straightened, the phone buzzed once more, screen lighting briefly before dimming again. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. For a heartbeat, I considered picking up. Maybe the anonymous sender, maybe someone else. The device stopped vibrating, leaving a faint echo in the room. I didn't check the message. Instead, I poured another glass of wine and sank into the armchair by the fire. The logs crackled, and the flames threw small, shifting shadows across the floor. Out there, in the hallway of my old apartment, my family would eventually give up and leave. Maybe they'd curse me all the way home. Maybe they'd rehearse new strategies, or maybe, for the first time, they'd sit in silence and feel the weight of their own choices. I didn't need to know which. Outside, the snow kept falling, each flake erasing another footprint from the day before. I leaned back, watching until the glass fogged with my breath. When I finally spoke, it was barely a whisper, almost a prayer. Let them learn what empty feels like. The phone pulsed once more, that same unknown number flickering to life. I stared at it without moving. Pulse steady, curiosity curling like smoke. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. I let it ring until it stopped, and in the silence that followed, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't afraid of who might be on the other end. The key turned easily this time. I stepped into my apartment, my newly rekeyed, freshly vacuumed, almost foreign apartment, and paused. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and dust. No trace of anyone else. For years, my home had been an open door for other people's needs, a halfway house for their crises. Now it was mine again. Completely mine. On the counter, a stack of unopened envelopes waited. I flipped through them mechanically. Bank statements, flyers, charity mailers, all the usual background noise of responsibility. I slid them aside, powered up my laptop, and opened my inbox. 43. Unread messages, all from my mother, father, and brother. Subject lines like urgent, answer us, you're overreacting, you've broken this family. The guilt, that old familiar reflex, tried to crawl back up my throat. But guilt requires belief. Belief that I owe them something. I didn't anymore. I clicked select all and then delete. Watching the progress bar crawl across the screen felt better than any therapy session could. The next few days were an exercise in restraint. I cooked meals for one. I went to the office early, stayed late, ignored the phone when it rang. When the weekend came, I didn't drive to my parents' house for dinner. I didn't send money for Corbin's rent. I didn't apologize for existing differently. Still, I knew silence wasn't the end. People like my family don't accept boundaries. They look for loopholes. The ambush came 3 weeks later. It was late evening in the underground garage beneath my office. The air was cold enough to see my breath. My heels clicked against the concrete, echoing louder than I expected. I spotted movement near the pillars, someone standing too still, the way people do when they're rehearsing a conversation. Daisy? The voice was familiar, syrupy, and sharp beneath the sweetness. I turned slowly. Aunt Jessica stepped out from behind the pillar, her beige trench coat cinched tight, pearl earrings gleaming like trophies. She smiled, that brittle kind of smile that means she's already winning. "Oh, honey," she said, clasping her hands together. "You're a hard woman to find." "I'm not hiding," I said, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. "Just living." Her laugh was soft, pitying. "Your mother is beside herself. She hasn't slept. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. And Corbin, well, he's been struggling." "I'm sure he is," I said. Jessica took a step closer, her heels careful against the slick floor. "Family is family, darling. You can't just cut people off. We all make mistakes, but you've made your point. You've hurt them enough." Hurt them. The phrase landed like a pebble dropped into a dry well. "You think I hurt them?" She blinked, surprised by my tone. "They're falling apart. Your father's truck was repossessed. They might lose the house." Her voice dipped into a practiced tremor. "Your mother cries every day. You know how fragile she is." I could almost see the gears turning in her head, each word chosen like a key meant to fit my old locks. Responsibility, guilt, pity. I stepped closer until I could see my reflection in the gloss of her pearls. "If they lose the house, it's because they built it on someone else's paycheck." Jessica flinched, the smile cracking. "You used to be such a good girl." "I used to be useful," I corrected. Not the same thing. The air between us thickened. I could feel the hum of the fluorescent lights above us, the low growl of a car engine in the distance. "You need to fix this," she said finally. "Be the bigger person." "I am," I said quietly. "That's why I walked away." Her face faltered. I could tell she'd rehearsed this encounter, expected tears, apologies, the old me begging for forgiveness. But all she got was stillness. "Good night, Aunt Jessica." I unlocked my car and slid inside before she could recover. Through the windshield, I saw her standing there, arms folded tight across her coat, already composing her version of the story for Meryl. The door shut with a soft final click that sounded like freedom. Over the next few days, the messages slowed. Maybe they were regrouping. Maybe they were deciding who to send next. When the phone rang again, it wasn't them. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Daisy, it's Marina." It took a moment to place the name, Corbin's ex, the one with the quiet eyes and a voice that never rose above calm. "I hope this isn't a bad time," she said. "No," I said. "I'm just surprised." "I think I owe you an explanation," she said, "about the video." My heartbeat picked up. "That was you?" "Yes." A pause, measured, almost apologetic. "I didn't plan it. I was at your parents' house helping Corbin set up his new sound system. I went to the bathroom, and when I came out, they were talking about you, laughing. Your mom said, 'Daisy is the easiest one to control,' and then they all laughed." Her voice didn't shake, but mine almost did. "So you filmed it?" "I did. It wasn't for revenge," she said. "It was disgust. I thought you deserved to know." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, meaningful, almost sacred. Someone had seen what I'd been too loyal to admit. "Thank you," I said finally. "You changed everything." "I broke up with Corbin right after," she added softly. "I realized he's just like them. He thought I was overreacting. He said you'd never notice anyway. So I sent it." I laughed once, quietly. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd already given you something priceless," she said. For the first time in months, something light fluttered in my chest. Not joy exactly, but recognition. We agreed to meet for coffee later that week. When I saw her in person, she looked younger than I remembered. Or maybe she just carried herself differently, free in a way I understood now. She told me about the moment she pressed send on the email, how her hands shook, but she knew it was right. "You would have figured it out eventually," she said. "Maybe," I admitted, "but you saved me years." We sat in silence for a while, two women connected by the same betrayal and the same clarity. When we parted, she hugged me lightly. "Don't let them pull you back," she said. "They'll try." "I know," I said. That night, I opened my laptop again, but not for them. I scrolled through listings for homes, real homes, with gardens and walls that didn't echo with guilt. A gate, I thought. I wanted a gate, not to keep the world out, but to remind me that entry was earned. 2 months later, I stood at the entrance of Oakwood Estates, sunlight glinting off the wrought iron fence. The security guard handed me the call box code and smiled. "Welcome home, Ms. Quinn." Home. The word hit differently this time. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and cedar. Boxes stacked neatly in corners waited for a future I could design myself. I pressed my hand to the kitchen counter, smooth quartz, cool under my palm. Everything I touched was mine. That evening, I poured a glass of wine, stepped onto the back patio, and watched the sun bleed behind the mountains. The quiet was so deep it felt like forgiveness. Then the gate intercom buzzed. The sudden noise startled me enough that I spilled a few drops of wine on the railing. The small screen by the door flickered to life, showing a figure standing at the call box, their face shadowed by the setting sun. For a heartbeat, I thought it might be Marina, come to visit. Then the person stepped closer, and my stomach turned cold. It wasn't her. It was my mother. Her hand pressed against the call button again. Her mouth moved, but the intercom hadn't connected yet, so I couldn't hear the words. She looked smaller than I remembered, almost fragile. But something in the tilt of her head, sharp, deliberate, told me she hadn't come here just to talk. I hesitated, finger hovering over the button to answer. This was it, the line between the life I'd built and the one I'd escaped. I took a breath, slow and steady. Then I pressed connect. Her voice came through, cracked and trembling. Daisy, please, it's your father. He's sick. We need you. The words hung in the quiet evening, heavy and familiar. Old reflexes stirred, but something deeper, steadier, rose to meet them. Boundaries, I reminded myself, are not cruelty. Still, I didn't hang up. Not yet. Tell me what's wrong, I said. She hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. And in that pause, I felt the old manipulation stirring again. Well-worn, rehearsed, weaponized. The game wasn't over. Not yet. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The faint buzz of the intercom filled the silence between my mother and me, thin and electric. Dad's in trouble, she said at last. He's really sick. We need help. Please, honey. Her voice cracked on that last word, and for an instant, a memory flickered. The sound of her calling me that when I was 10 years old and terrified of thunderstorms. Back then, it had sounded like comfort. Now, it was currency. What happened? I asked, keeping my tone even. He collapsed, she said, the words tumbling out too fast, too smooth. The doctors say it's serious. We don't have the money for treatment. Your father didn't want me to call, but I had no choice. There it was, the hook. Always money, wrapped in tragedy. What hospital? I asked quietly. A pause. Barely half a second, but long enough. Saint something. The one near, the park. My jaw tightened. St. Mercy? Yes, she said quickly, relief flooding her voice. That's it. Please, Daisy, we're desperate. I leaned against the counter, staring at the faint reflection of my face on the dark intercom screen. My mother's image shifted slightly, and I could see she'd angled her body just right so the camera would catch the trembling lip, the red eyes, the pearls catching the light. She'd always understood performance. The part of me that had lived for their approval, the obedient daughter, the rescuer, twitched like a ghost limb. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that this was real. But I'd learned something over the years. Truth doesn't hesitate. Lies always need rehearsal. I'll call the hospital, I said simply. The mask slipped, barely. That's not necessary, she said too quickly. We're handling it. We just need a little help, that's all. I exhaled slowly, the sound fogging the screen. Then you'll be fine, I said, and pressed disconnect. Her face vanished. The screen went black. Outside, the engine of her car revved, then sputtered. For a moment, I thought she might come through the gate, try to push it, call again. But after a long minute, the sound faded. Silence settled around the house like snowfall. I turned back to the kitchen, to the unpacked boxes waiting for me. Inside one of them was a set of wine glasses I'd bought just last week. They were absurdly delicate, completely impractical, something the old me would have labeled unnecessary. I unpacked them one by one, setting each on the counter. The glass caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows onto the wall. It was almost pretty enough to make me forget the shaking in my hands. I opened a bottle of Chianti, poured a slow measure into one of the glasses, and took a sip. It tasted like quiet rebellion. The intercom stayed silent. Still, the unease wouldn't leave. What if she wasn't lying? What if Dad really was sick? What if I'd just hung up on something irreversible? I turned the possibilities over in my head like jagged stones. Gideon, pale in a hospital bed. My mother, alone in a waiting room. The guilt began to stir, stretching its limbs after weeks of dormancy. I walked to the front window and stared out into the dusk. The light was fading, that soft, uncertain hour where the world can feel like anything. I could drive to the hospital, just to check. No one would have to know. But then I remembered the video. Corbin's laugh, Meryl's smirk, My father raising a glass and a toast to my bonus. Just as long as the workhorse keeps pulling. The guilt shrank, the clarity returned. This was the test, the final one. The moment where love and manipulation wore the same face and I had to tell them apart. I set the wine glass down, the stem clicking softly against the counter. You taught me what mercy costs, I whispered. I'm not buying anymore. When I walked past the front table, a stack of mail caught my eye. Bills, catalogs, one thin white envelope from a clinic. I frowned. It was addressed to Gideon Prescott, my father, forwarded from my old apartment. The return address read, St. Mercy Medical Center. My chest tightened. I sat down slowly, turning the envelope over in my hands. My mother had said Saint something. I hesitated for a moment, then tore it open. Inside was a single-page invoice. My eyes skimmed the words, routine dental surgery follow-up, payment confirmation received. I let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. So that was it. The medical emergency. The crisis that had brought her to my gate. A dentist bill, already paid. The absurdity of it all broke something loose in me. I started laughing, quietly at first, then louder, until tears welled at the corners of my eyes. The sound filled the kitchen, strange and cathartic, like the air escaping a sealed jar. When the laughter faded, I wiped my cheeks and took another sip of wine. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was done. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall kitchen windows, golden and soft. I stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, cradling a cup of coffee. Outside, the world was silent, except for birds. The peace felt fragile, but real. My phone buzzed with the new message. For a split second, I expected another plea, another performance, but it was from Marina. Proud of you, it read. You didn't let them win. I smiled, typing back, thank you for reminding me what real kindness looks like. Later that day, I walked the perimeter of my new garden. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and earth, grounding and steady. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to safety. But as I circled back toward the gate, I noticed faint tire tracks in the gravel, fresh ones. They trailed away from the intercom and vanished down the road. I watched them for a long time, the wind tugging at my hair. My mother had been here. She'd left without another word. That should have been the end. But as I turned to go inside, a faint voice echoed in my mind, one I hadn't expected, Marina's, soft and certain from our last conversation. They'll try again. I didn't doubt it. Still, when I shut the door behind me and locked it, the sound was satisfying in a way no apology ever could be. That night, I poured myself another glass of wine and raised it toward the dark window, where my reflection met my gaze. To boundaries, I whispered, to choosing peace over guilt. The words didn't feel like a declaration. They felt like a prayer. And this time, I knew God was listening. Morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, pale and clean, cutting through the last ghost of last night's thoughts. I stood there barefoot, coffee in hand, feeling the kind of stillness that doesn't demand anything. The house was quiet, no phone buzzing, no doorbells, no intercom lights, just the sound of my own breathing. The unopened boxes in the hallway called for attention, but I didn't rush. Every plate, every book, every picture frame could wait. I'd spent a lifetime moving at the pace of other people's needs. Now I was learning what it meant to move at mine. The mail on the counter sat in a neat pile. On top of it lay the envelope from the clinic, the fake emergency that had nearly reeled me back. I slipped it into a drawer without a second glance. That chapter was done. By the time I reached the office later that week, the fluorescent lights no longer felt like interrogation. My coworkers noticed, even if they didn't say it outright. "You look different," one of them said, eyes narrowing with something like envy. "Lighter." Maybe I was. A few days later, I was in the break room pouring coffee when Jenna, one of the new reps, cornered me. Her voice trembled, the way mine once did when I was pretending everything was fine. "Do you have a minute?" Of course. She twisted her mug between her hands. "My sister's kid needs braces," she said quickly. $5,000. She asked if I could help since I'm doing so well lately. Her tone dripped with air quotes. "I don't know what to do." I studied her face, the fatigue behind the polite smile, the quiet panic in her eyes. I saw myself there, years ago, measuring self-worth in sacrifices. "Don't," I said simply. She blinked. "Don't what?" "Don't set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm." Her eyes widened. "I can't just ignore her." "I didn't say ignore," I said gently. "I said don't burn. Help if you want to, but not if it costs you everything." She looked at me, processing, and nodded slowly. You sound like you've done this before. I smiled faintly. You have no idea. That night, I sat at my desk at home, staring at my open laptop. The screen glowed with a travel site. Italy, the country I'd dreamed of for a decade. I'd searched it 3 times this week, always closing the tab before completing the purchase. The old habit of hesitation, of guilt, still lingered like a phantom limb. I sipped wine and looked around the room. The walls were blank but bright. On the table by the window sat a vase of tulips, crimson and gold, the first flowers I'd ever bought for no reason other than wanting them. I thought of the last 7 years, of every postponed dream and drained account, of every time I'd said maybe next year. Then I thought of the woman who'd stood at her own gate and lied without flinching. I turned back to the laptop, moved the cursor, and clicked purchase. The confirmation pinged softly, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. No guilt, no mental math about who else might need the money. Just me, choosing. I leaned back, smiling to myself. The trip cost nearly triple what it once had, but for the first time it felt worth every cent. A few days later, Marina arrived at my doorstep, holding a bottle of wine and a small wrapped box. You're officially the first guest to use the front gate, I said as I opened the door. Historic moment, she laughed. Should we commemorate it? We took a photo. 2 women who had escaped the same gravity. Then I led her to the kitchen, where dinner waited. Homemade pasta, candlelight, music low in the background. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. This place is beautiful, she said, looking around. It feels like you. That's the best compliment I've had in years, I said. We talked for hours, about books, travel, new plans, not about Corbin or my parents. Not because it was forbidden, but because it didn't matter anymore. When she finally mentioned him, her tone was almost casual. He asked about you again, said he wants to make things right. I refilled her glass. He'll figure out how to live without me, I said softly. Or he won't. Either way, that's his work to do. She nodded, smiling. You really are free. I wasn't sure when the word free had stopped sounding impossible. After she left, I cleaned up slowly, humming to myself. The house smelled of basil and warm bread. The quiet no longer felt empty, it felt earned. 2 weeks later, the morning of my flight arrived. I packed lightly, comfortable shoes, linen dresses, a journal. Everything I needed, nothing I didn't. Before leaving, I stood at the entryway, admiring the mosaic vase on the table. Its deep reds caught the morning light, reflecting onto the cream wall behind it like a sunrise. Above it hung a painting, abstract strokes of gold and crimson that reminded me of Tuscan skies. I smiled. I'd spent my life giving, fixing, apologizing. Now I was creating, choosing, becoming. I zipped the suitcase, set the alarm, and opened the front door. The world outside glowed, brighter than it had in years. As I stepped onto the porch, my phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart stuttered, old reflexes dying hard, but it wasn't my family. It was Marina. Send me a picture when you land, her text read. You earned this. I typed back. I will. Thank you for everything. Then I slipped the phone into my pocket, lifted the suitcase, and walked toward the waiting cab. At the gate, the driver paused, glancing in the rearview mirror. Beautiful property, he said. It is, I replied, and it's peaceful. The gate opened with a low hum, sunlight flooding the path ahead. As we drove away, the iron bars closed slowly behind us with a soft metallic sigh, like a curtain falling after the final act. The air smelled like pine and morning dew. I rolled down the window, let the wind tangle my hair, and closed my eyes. For once, I wasn't running away. I was simply going. The workhorse was gone. The woman who replaced her had learned something simpler, stronger, truer. Freedom isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the sound of your own footsteps moving toward a life that finally belongs to you. And as the cab turned toward the airport, I whispered to myself, steady, certain, smiling, this journey is mine.